let's talk about what are the remedies for Tesla here? Did they just simply say, look, it was an anomaly? I think their first fix is that they issued a over-the-air upgrade that allows the drivers to raise the suspension of the vehicle to get them higher off the ground, so they're less prone to this, what we called in the service FOD, foreign object damage.
Okay, right.
So what, beyond that, what are some of the things that they could be doing short term and then long term, do you think?
So my understanding would be just to better reinforce the packaging around the battery. I know that there have been some questions around whether this means they should go back to the drawing board and look at different battery technologies and try to understand different chemistries. And I wouldn't be in favor of that at all. I think it's, again, the nature of the beast that if you have an automobile that you want to have a certain amount of range, well, you have to have a certain amount of energy on board. And lithium is very, very good for that. It carries a lot of energy in a very light and compact form factor. But they probably need to maybe look a little more closely at the armor plating and other packaging they have around these batteries. And as you mentioned, the height differential between the bottom of the vehicle and the road to better shield people from even these kinds of freak-type accidents.
Yeah, well, apparently the truck that he was following closely behind obviously drove over the top, and one would assume this is the case of the doctor in Tennessee, that other people had driven over or avoided that particular thing, but apparently he saw it too late to avoid it, so...
I see.
Yeah.
That happened to me one time with a piece of a tractor-trailer tire that I drove over, unfortunately, in the evening one night. It came out from underneath the car right in front of me, and luckily I was in a rental car that day because the whole front of the bumper of the rental car was almost attached and had fallen underneath the car when I got back to my destination.
Wow.
It was amazing how much damage even that did.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so short term would be look at fixing the armor under the vehicle, and I understand what that is something like a half-inch aluminum plating there. So maybe they could look at some type of a maybe carbon fiber or something if they want to keep it light. Obviously, some type of reinforced Kevlar kind of carbon fiber thing, I would imagine. Anything else? Well, chemistry, for example, valence, which just came out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy, it touted as being the safest chemistry out there, but of course the chemistry that they use would limit the range then of the vehicle, is my understanding.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that group and what chemistry they use. A lot of times when people talk about the safety of lithium batteries, they talk about the safety of the electrolyte. They talk about the safety of the cathode components and whether they're going to produce oxygen or not during overcharge events. But really, if you're using lithium anywhere, no matter what the rest of the chemistry is around you, it comes back to the same issue. You have a lot of energy in there, even if you're not using lithium, even if you're using magnesium or aluminum batteries, as some people are working on. We have some projects in our labs here on these types of batteries. You can make them quite safe internally, and a lot of work in our center and other centers are doing that. But again, if you mistreat them, if you rip them open and expose them to air, if you put them underwater or puncture them in the wrong ways or try to light them on fire, that energy is going to get out of there some way, whether it goes to your wheels and helps you, or whether it gets out and causes an explosion and doesn't help you.
Right, exactly. Okay, so long term, one possibility would be shift to hydrogen fuel cells, maybe.
Well, there are certainly some advantages to looking at hydrogen fuel cells. I know that Tesla and Elon himself are not great fans of the technology. I think they believe it's a little bit further off in the future. But there are a number of vehicle manufacturers right now that are poised to release their fuel cell electric vehicles to the market in the next 18 months or so. They're going to start showing up. And the places where they're going to show up are the places that already have hydrogen infrastructure existing, so hydrogen refueling stations. That really, as it turns out, has become now the limiting factor in the commercialization of this type of vehicle. It's not the car anymore, but really the hydrogen.
Right. Where are you going to get it from, and how do you transport it, and some of those critical issues. So bring us up to speed real quick. We've got Honda, which introduced their concept car in LA.
Right.
I guess we consider it the Clarity Gen 2, pretty futuristic looking vehicle. You've got somewhat less futuristic looking vehicle, the FCV from Toyota, introduced at the Tokyo Auto Show. And then, of course, Hyundai has been touting the fact that they're going to be first to market in 2014
Right.
with their Tucson SUV. So, what's different about those vehicles that's going to allow them to begin to, I gather, probably lease them initially?
Yeah, I think the plans might be for initial leasing. That's a great point. It's really nothing dramatic that's happened over the last year or two. It's really been more a steady progression of the automotive engineering and the technology teams, both in automotive industry, working together with academia and sometimes national labs in our country, that have helped to bring the evolution of this technology along from the place where it was a great concept maybe 20 years ago or so to now where it's really ready for manufacturing and release to commercial markets, to everyday vehicle markets.
Where are we at in terms of the life cycle of the stack itself? I remember that
Mhm.
technically the limiting factor was that the you're looking at maybe a cycle of 500 hours to 1,500 hours, and that to be commercially viable, they thought they needed to get to 5,000 hours, which is comparable to 200 to 300,000 miles. Where are we
Right.
at now?
Yeah, from my understanding, we had a close association here with one of the auto manufacturers. I don't know if they would mind me telling you, but you could probably look on the map and figure out which one used to be closest to us
Well,
here.
yeah, we
Um,
know.
but they've achieved past the 5,000 hour target now, and I
Okay.
believe that's pretty consistent around the auto industry. I think that's one of the last hurdles that the engineering teams in these different auto manufacturers have overcome is the durability issue. And you're also seeing now some alliances between car companies,
Right.
some three-way alliances, some two-way alliances that are helping to overcome the last issues with technology, but really are overcoming the more business-related issues with a little bit of manufacturing and deployment and infrastructure building.
Right. So I guess at this point, it looks to me like our key obstacle now is going to be the infrastructure to fuel these things.
Right, that's exactly
Do
right.
we see any kind of effort here? I mean, at one time there was talk of creating, if you've got a home with natural gas piped into it, you could have a small reformer. I think Honda was sort of working in this area, a
Hmm.
small reformer that would create the hydrogen for you out of that, methane. Are we at that, or are we still looking at expensive central service stations and that type of thing?
I think we're somewhere in between. I think there are some places that are still looking to have small units, maybe in the home, but also places that are going to allow you to have distributed hydrogen stations where right on site at the gas station, you're producing hydrogen, storing it, and dispensing it for the vehicles that are coming along. And that's going to allow us to get into hydrogen filling stations at a much less cost and a much quicker time frame than having full centralized capabilities with pipelines or trucks. I think it'll allow people to get going much faster and in a much more agile way.
Okay, so do we see a transportation system evolving here where the battery electric vehicles, a la the Teslas, can coexist alongside the Honda Clarities? That
Mhm.
there are people who are very satisfied with electric car that gets, in this case, 200 miles range with the Tesla, as opposed to people who said, no, I gotta be able, tomorrow I'm driving to grandmother's house for
Right.
Thanksgiving, and she's 400 miles away, so I've got to have that range that's in the hydrogen vehicle. Is that sort of evolving? Is this kind of a cooperative world or a competitive world between these two technologies?
So I'd say there, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, if you will, and I think it depends on who you ask. So folks at Toyota have come out publicly and said that even though they introduced the Prius and they were helping to introduce battery technology to vehicles, their future they see for transportation is all in hydrogen and fuel cell electric vehicles. They've said that publicly now a number of times this year. What I think we see at Cornell and looking at the landscape is a distribution of energy types coming into transportation that's going to mirror somewhat the distribution of energy we see on the grid. We have a lot of different ways we can make electricity from the grid. And I think similarly, you're going to see the coexistence of hydrogen electric vehicles as well as battery electric vehicles.
Do
For
the, do
around
the,
city driving and short range driving, batteries are going to make a lot of sense. But as you say, the flexible and long range driving, I think fuel cells are going to find a niche there first.
Yeah, it would seem to me that the fuel cells probably make most sense initially in something like over-the-road trucks, where you've got capacity to put, large storage tanks under the, the bellies of the vehicles. And they obviously have to have the range that you're talking about as opposed to, the passenger car. So, I mean, I would see that kind of evolving then.
Right. I think there are some efforts in that regard that people are looking at that. I know we're working with one company here in the state who is adapting fuel cell technology for transit buses.
Right.
And they're actually bringing a transit bus here to Ithaca and to Cornell through a Department of Transportation funded program around next year at this time. We should be expecting that bus. And it's those kind of vehicles, as well as passenger cars and really fleet vehicles, I think will be the first places that you see this taking off, because that way you get a cluster of users right around the station that can support the station in the early years and then get it ready for the network of stations that you would need to make the regular car driver comfortable that they could get to where they need to get to with hydrogen. Okay. Some of these networks already exist. Southern California has some of these networks. Places in Europe have networks like this already. And so those clusters are already ready to go. Other ones are going to have to grow up.
Yep. All right, great. Well, hey, I don't want you to get talked too much in this snowstorm here, so I thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. I've had Paul Mutolo with me from Cornell University's Materials Center, and I do appreciate it, Paul. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Nice talking with you this afternoon.
All right. Okay. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.